The Slender Man is a supernatural character that originated as a creepypasta internet meme created by Something Awful forum user Eric Knudsen in 2009. He is depicted as a thin, unnaturally tall humanoid with a featureless white head and face, wearing a black suit. Stories of the Slender Man commonly feature him stalking, abducting, or traumatizing people, particularly children. The Slender Man has become a pop culture icon, although he is not confined to a single narrative but appears in many disparate works of fiction, typically composed online. Fiction relating to the Slender Man encompasses many media, including literature, art, and video series. The character has appeared in the video game Slender, The 8 Pages, and its successor Slender, The Arrival. Starting in 2014, a moral panic occurred over the Slender Man after readers of his fiction were connected to several violent acts, particularly a near-fatal stabbing of a 12-year-old girl in Waukesha, Wisconsin. The stabbing inspired the 2016 documentary, Beware the Slender Man. The Slender Man was originally created in June of 2009, on a thread in the Something Awful internet forum. The thread was a Photoshop contest in which users were challenged to create paranormal images. Forum poster Eric Knudsen, under the pseudonym Victor Surg, contributed 2 black and white images of groups of children to which he added a tall, thin, spectral figure wearing a black suit. Although previous entries had consisted solely of photographs, Victor Surge accompanied his submission with snatches of text, supposedly from witnesses, describing the abductions of the groups of children and giving the character the name, the Slender Man. The quote under the first photograph read, "We didn't want to go, we didn't want to kill them, but its persistent silence and outstretched arms horrified and comforted us at the same time." The quote under the second photograph read, "One of 2 recovered photographs from the Sterling City Library Blaze. Notable for being taken the day which 14 children vanished and for what is referred to as the Slender Man. Deformities cited as film defects by officials. Fire at library occurred 1 week later. Actual photograph confiscated as evidence." Eric Knudsen was inspired to create the Slender Man primarily by Zach Parsons' That Insidious Beast, Stephen King's The Mist, reports of Shadow People, Mothman, and the Mad Gasser of Mattoon. Knudsen's intention was to formulate something whose motivations can barely be comprehended and caused unease and terror in a general population. In her book, Folklore, Horror Stories, and the Slender Man, The Development of an Internet Mythology, Professor Shira Chess of the University of Georgia connected the Slender Man to ancient folklore about fairies. Like fairies, the Slender Man is otherworldly, with motives that are often difficult to grasp. Like fairies, his appearance is vague and often shifts to reflect what the viewer wants or fears to see. And, like fairies, the Slender Man lives in the woods and wild places and kidnaps children. The Slender Man soon went viral, spawning numerous works of fan art, cosplay, and online fiction known as creepypasta, horror stories told in short snatches of easily copyable text that spread from site to site. Divorced from its original creator, the Slender Man became the subject of myriad stories by multiple authors within an overarching mythos. Many aspects of the Slender Man mythos first appeared on the original Something Awful thread. One of the earliest editions was added by a forum user named ThrowUp, who created a folklore story set in 16th century Germany involving a character called Der Grossmann, which was implied to be an early reference to the Slender Man. The first video series involving the Slender Man evolved from a post on the Something Awful thread by user CEGARS. It tells of a fictional film school friend named Alex Crawley, who had stumbled upon something troubling while shooting his first feature-length project, Marble Hornets. The video series, published in found footage style on YouTube, forms an alternate reality game describing the filmer's fictional experiences with the Slender Man. As of 2013, Marble Hornets had over 250,000 subscribers around the world and had received 55 million views. Other Slender Man-themed YouTube serials followed, including Everyman Hybrid and Tribe 12. In 2012, the Slender Man was adapted into a video game titled Slender, The 8 Pages. Within its first month of release, the game was downloaded over 2 million times. Several popular variants of the game followed, including Slender Man's Shadow. The sequel to Slender, The 8 Pages, Slender, The Arrival, was released in 2013. Several independent films about the Slender Man have been released or are in development, including Entity and the Slender Man, released free online after a $10,000 Kickstarter campaign. Because the Slender Man's mythology has evolved without an official canon for reference, his appearance, motives, habits, and abilities are not fixed but change depending on the storyteller. He is most commonly described as very tall and thin with unnaturally long, tentacle-like arms, which he can extend to intimidate or capture prey. In most stories, his face is white and featureless, but occasionally his face appears differently to anyone who sees it. He appears to be wearing a dark suit and tie. The Slender Man is often associated with the forest and/or abandoned locations and has the ability to teleport. Proximity to the Slender Man is often said to trigger a slender sickness, a rapid onset of paranoia, nightmares and delusions accompanied by nosebleeds. Early stories featured him targeting children or young adults. Some featured young adults driven insane or to act on his behalf, while others did not, and others claimed that investigating the Slender Man will draw his attention. The web series Marble Hornets established the idea of proxies, humans who fall under the Slender Man's influence. Though initially, they were simply violently insane, rather than puppets of the Slender Man. Marble Hornets also introduced the idea that the Slender Man could interfere with video and audio recordings, as well as the Slender Man symbol, which became a common trope of Slender Man fiction. Graphic violence and body horror are uncommon in the Slender Man mythos, with many narratives choosing to leave the fate of his victims obscure. Media scholar and folklorist Andrew Peck attributes the success of the Slender Man to its highly collaborative nature. Because the character and its motives are shrouded in mystery, users can easily adapt existing Slender Man tropes and imagery to create new stories. This ability for users to tap into the ideas of others while also supplying their own helped inspire the collaborative culture that arose surrounding the Slender Man. In these respects, the Slender Man is similar to campfire stories or urban legends, and the character's success comes from enabling both social interaction and personal acts of creative expression. Although nearly all users understand that the Slender Man is not real, they suspend that disbelief in order to become more engrossed when telling or listening to stories. This adds a sense of authenticity to Slender Man legend performances and blurs the lines between legend and reality, keeping the creature as an object of legend dialectic. This ambiguity has led to some confusion over the character's origin and purpose. Only 5 months after his creation, George Norrie's Coast to Coast AM, a radio call-in show devoted to the paranormal and conspiracy theories, began receiving callers asking about the Slender Man. 2 years later, an article in the Minneapolis Star-Tribune described his origins as difficult to pinpoint. Eric Knudsen has commented that many people, despite understanding that the Slender Man was created on the Something Awful forums, still entertain the possibility that he might be real. In May of 2014, two 12-year-old girls in Waukesha, Wisconsin held down and stabbed a 12-year-old classmate 19 times. When questioned later by authorities, they reportedly claimed that they wished to commit a murder as a first step to becoming proxies for the Slender Man, having read about it online. They also stated that they were afraid that Slender Man would kill their families if they did not commit the murder. After the perpetrators left the scene, the victim crawled out of the woods to a roadway. A passing cyclist alerted authorities, and the victim survived the attack. One of the girls reportedly said Slender Man watches her, can read minds and could teleport. Experts testified in court that she also said she conversed with Lord Voldemort and one of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. In early August of 2014, she was found incompetent to stand trial and her prosecution was suspended until her condition improved. In November of 2014, A doctor judged that her condition had improved enough for her to stand trial, and in December of 2014 the judge ruled that both girls were competent to stand trial. In August of 2015, the presiding judge ruled that the girls would be tried as adults. They were tried separately. In August of 2017, one of the girls, then 15, pleaded guilty to being a party to attempted second-degree homicide, but claimed she was not responsible for her actions on grounds of insanity. Although prosecutors alleged that she knew what she was doing was wrong, the jury determined that she was mentally ill during the attack. She was sentenced to spend at least 3 years in a mental hospital. In December of 2017, Waukesha County Circuit Judge Michael Bourne sentenced Anissa Weier, then 16 years old, to be hospitalized for 25 years from the date of the crime, which would keep her institutionalized until age 37. In a statement to the media in June of 2014, Eric Knudsen said, "I am deeply saddened by the tragedy in Wisconsin, and my heart goes out to the families of those affected by this terrible act." He stated he would not be giving interviews on the matter. In September of 2017, it was reported that Morgan Geyser, then 15, had agreed to plead guilty to attempting to commit first-degree homicide in an arrangement that would allow her to avoid jail time. In February of 2018, the Associated Press reported that Geyser had been sentenced to 40 years in the Wisconsin mental hospital, the maximum sentence allowed. The stabbing in Waukesha spawned a nationwide moral panic over Slender Man across the United States. Parents across the nation became worried about the potential dangers that stories about Slender Man might pose to their children's safety. Russell Jack, the police chief of Waukesha, warned that the Slender Man stabbing should be a wake-up call for all parents that the internet is full of dark and wicked things, a warning which numerous media outlets publicized. The Waukesha stabbing and the negative media attention it generated irreversibly altered the Slender Man legend and the online community surrounding it. What had previously just been a creepy horror meme to most people suddenly acquired a new level of reality that most fans of Slender Man found horrifying. Meanwhile, by around the same time, the Slender Man character had lost much of his original popularity. Most of the original blogs that had once been devoted to Slender Man either shut down completely or became less popular. Slender Man's presence in mainstream popular culture also contributed to a decline in how frightening he seemed to many people. The late 2010s also saw an increase in benevolent portrayals of Slender Man, with many depictions of him from this period portraying him as an anti-hero who protects victimized children from bullies, although often by violent means. In some portrayals of Slender Man from the late 2010s, he has a daughter named Skinny Sally, who is portrayed as a young girl covered in cuts and bruises. Slender Man sometimes is portrayed carrying Skinny Sally on his shoulders protectively. Lynn McNeil, assistant professor of folklore at Utah State University, observes that the increase in benevolent portrayals of Slender Man seems to have begun shortly after the stabbing in Waukesha, and states that this trend towards a benevolent Slender Man may be a reaction by fans of the character to the violence of the stabbing. Despite the decline in popular interest in Slender Man, commercial adaptations of the character continued. In 2015, the film adaptation of Marble Hornets, titled Always Watching, A Marble Hornets Story, was released on video on demand, where the character was portrayed by Doug Jones. In 2016, Sony Pictures subsidiary Screen Gems partnered with Mythology Entertainment to bring a Slender Man film into theaters, with the title character portrayed by Javier Botet. The film generated considerable controversy soon after it was announced, with many accusing the filmmakers of trying to capitalize off the Waukesha stabbing. Bill Weier, the father of Anissa Weier, stated, "It's absurd they want to make a movie like this. All we're doing is extending the pain all three of these families have gone through." The progressive advocacy group Care2 created an online petition, which received over 19,000 signatures, demanding that the film not be released, labeling the film crass commercialism at its worst and a naked cash grab built on the exploitation of a deeply traumatic event and the people who lived it. Upon its release in August 2018, the film Slender Man, despite being declared a box office bomb and receiving both little marketing and overwhelmingly negative reviews from critics, went on to gross several times its $10 million budget worldwide. David Ehrlich of IndieWire gave the film a D, writing a tasteless and inevitably undercooked serving of the internet's stalest creepypasta. Slender Man aspires to be for the YouTube era what The Ring was to the last gasps of the VHS generation. But there's one fundamental difference that sets the two movies apart: The Ring is good, and Slender Man is terrible. Writing for The Verge, Carly Valachi called the Slender Man movie a nail in the coffin of a dying fandom. Several scholars have argued that, despite being a fictional work with an identifiable origin point, the Slender Man represents a form of digital folklore. Shira Chess argues that the Slender Man exemplifies the similarities between traditional folklore and the open-source ethos of the internet, and that, unlike those of traditional monsters such as vampires and werewolves, the fact that the Slender Man's mythos can be tracked and signposted offers a powerful insight into how myth and folklore form. Chess identifies three aspects of the Slender Man mythos that tie it to folklore: collectivity, meaning that it is created by a collective, rather than a single individual; variability, meaning that the story changes depending on the teller; and performance, meaning that the storyteller's narrative changes to reflect the audience's response. Professor Thomas Pettit of the University of Southern Denmark has described the Slender Man as being an exemplar of the modern age's closing of the Gutenberg parenthesis, the time period from the invention of the printing press to the spread of the web in which stories and information were codified in discrete media, to a return to the older, more primal forms of storytelling, exemplified by oral tradition and campfire tales, in which the same story can be retold, reinterpreted and recast by different tellers, allowing the lore to expand and evolve with time.